It's time now for the Retirement Playbook with Rick and Granger Hughes from the Hughes Retirement Group. Welcome to the Retirement Playbook. I'm your host, James Howard, alongside Rick and Granger Hughes. Over the next half hour, we're going to be discussing planning for a successful retirement and why so many people in this country are missing the mark. All right, here's what's in store. I want you to pay attention. It's about building your retirement plan, a written retirement plan. Yes, we'll discuss, of course, income, of course, taxes, and growth strategies, plus how market volatility can change your outlook. But first, let's meet these wonderful gentlemen. Let's meet Rick and Granger Hughes, the father-son duo, a part of a wonderful team at Hughes Retirement Group, a Chattanooga area firm that focuses on preparing people just like you for retirement. Rick and Granger are also popular radio hosts. All right, let's get started. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. We have a lot to learn in the next 28 and a half minutes. All right, you've said this in the past, Rick. The three most important things in retirement: income, income, income. Obviously, that's important.
Absolutely, James. I mean, one day we know the check is going to stop. So right now, you know how much you need to spend each month to pay your bills. You know the check's coming in, whether you get paid bi-weekly or monthly, whatever the case may be. But then one day that check stops. And so income becomes important. So you're looking at different sources of income. It may be Social Security, it could be pension, it could be something from your 401k or traditional IRA, whatever the case is. But that needs to be managed better now because, again, the biggest fear retirees have is outliving their money.
All right, so Granger, so he touched on a lot of what I was going to ask you. When it comes to somebody saying, okay, I've got Social Security, I've got a little pension, but is that enough?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question you've got to ask yourself, and this is why he always talks about kind of test driving that budget. How much do you plan on spending in retirement? And one of the things that we try to look at is not just what we're going to spend, but when you're looking, James, and you say, okay, I've got Social Security, I've got pension, I've got a 401k, I've got some capital gains, what is that interaction of income going to do to your tax liability? And so one of the things that we do is we try to sit down and we try to show people, okay, here's where you stand from an asset standpoint. Here's where you stand from a likelihood. If things were to change, or we talk about this 2034 magical number where Social Security has to be cut by 25%, here's the likelihood that you could be affected. So when he talks about income and creating income plans, I think it's even different today than it was 10, 15 years ago, because Social Security you may not get 100% of your benefit. We already look at the Social Security tax that we have for $32,000, which is for a married couple, or $44,000, where they tax you up to 85% of your Social Security. So how much of our benefit will we be taking home? And so when you throw in long-term capital gains or short-term capital gains, when you throw in pensions, Social Security, IRA distributions, you may find yourself in a higher tax bracket than you were anticipating, because, you know, he says all the time, a lot of financial advisors will say, you'll be in the lowest tax bracket when you retire. Well, what's that bracket going to be? We don't know. And we know right now kind of what's going on in the tax landscape. But when we're projecting out 5, 10, 15 years, if the debt doesn't come down, somebody's going to have to pay that bill.
And James, let me say this to the viewers out there. I can't stress enough, if you're within a couple of years of retirement, develop yourself a budget as if you are retired. Because when that day comes and you say, okay, I think we need net amount of income, and then you actually start using that income and go, oh, we're short. You know, it would be good, as Granger just said earlier, test drive that. So develop a budget, because most people that come into our office, when we ask them how much net income they need in retirement, most don't know. That's a fact.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Because I was going to ask you, you know, what's kind of flashing in my head and before you right now is the word lifestyle. And that's so important, because that lifestyle could change. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what we want to do, again, we want them to have a quality life, lifestyle that they want to do. Some want to do more than others. That's very important. But we're not looking for somebody to go into retirement and they're pinching pennies, you know. We want them, again, to continue. That's what retirement should be about. It should be about, doing some things that maybe you haven't done in the past and enjoying your time off from work and that sort of thing.
And I would say on that, that's why creating income income is so important, because if you've created enough income streams to where you're not having to worry so much about the 2008s or the 2020s of the world, it kind of gives you a freedom to spend, a license to spend, if you will. It frees you up mentally to say, you know what, do I want to have a 2008 or a 2020? Absolutely not. But I know that my check's not going to stop. So that's why we are big believers in creating income to make sure that our lifestyle doesn't change.
I guess it has everything to do with we got to be careful when it comes to stock market dependence.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at stock market dependence, I mean, years ago, we know that a lot of people had pensions. We obviously know that's subsiding, right? You're not seeing as many people with pensions now. So if you're have $500,000, $1 million, $2 million in a 401k, and you're now taxed with the responsibility of how much do I take out and when do I take it out. And this is why we always talk about with our clients, you can look at the stock market and historically say, hey, the S&P's been up over the past 5 years. But what have we dealt with recently, even this year? We've had several strings of pretty large losses throughout that week. Well, you're taking distributions as a retiree at all different times of the year, more than likely. So you could be taking money from a down market, even if at the end of the year they end up positive.
With you talking about losses, what could a big loss mean at this stage of life, Rick?
Well, let's go back to 2008, and hopefully we don't see that again, okay? But 2008, obviously people lost 30 to 50% of their portfolio. And think about the people that were getting ready to retire or maybe just entered retirement relying on that 401k, let's say. It could have put them in a very bad situation. Maybe they couldn't retire. Maybe they had to go back to work. Okay, so obviously when you're going into retirement, it's important to look at how much risk you're taking on. May want to dial back the risk, and again, may not want to have all your eggs in one basket. That's why when we talk about Social Security, pension, or creating yourself your own pension, that's important because, again, you might be able to be a little bit more risky in the market if you've got fixed income over there. And if you don't, and you're relying strictly on what's in the market, you're just hoping and praying you don't have a 2008.
But when we're looking at the market, I mean, one of the things that we do, and we've talked about this before, but from a core portfolio standpoint, we try to look at it from a non-emotional, methodical, mathematical approach. So we're actually using math, and we're trying to take our emotions out of these wild swings that we may have, and then we may earmark funds for income. We may earmark funds for where we're saying, okay, we want to kind of shift this credit risk or this company risk, or maybe we want to go more European than we do U.S. equity. So we may not want to be 100% heavy in U.S. stock. We may want to have, exposure overseas and things of that nature. So you start diversifying away a lot of that risk. It doesn't mean that you're not partaking if the S&P is doing well or the Dow's doing well, but you're not exposing yourself to 100% of that loss.
Yeah. Okay. When it comes to preparing for those taxes, what does that look like in retirement?
I mean, it's one of the most crucial things that I think people forget to do. And we've talked about it, and I'm going to keep talking about it. But the three buckets of money: taxable, tax deferred, and tax free. I don't think people really understand the impact of that. And the reason I say that is because, Dad, how many times have we done classes where somebody said to me, well, should I invest in a Roth? I think, is a Roth more conservative? I don't know. How have you invested in that Roth? Do you own Apple stock? Do you own S&P index funds? Because you can own, as we've said in the past, in your taxable account, okay, your brokerage account that's 1099, you can own Apple stock. In your 401k, you can own Apple stock. In your Roth IRA, you can own Apple stock. The only difference is how will it be taxed, okay? So some of the benefits that you're getting and you're kind of encouraged and shifted towards contributing to these tax-deferred accounts, like 401ks, 457, Simple SEP. The government's made it, I would say, relatively easy to get money in that, and you get to reduce your taxable income. It helps you today. But that future tax bill is going to come. Yeah. And there's going to come a day where the government says, hey, congratulations, we did a great job. We want a cut of ours, So they are going to take a cut. And so if all of our money is in that bucket, we're kind of leading ourselves to the whims and whatever the government feels like taxes should be at that time.
And what most people don't think of, James, and Granger's mentioned this before, when you have a 401k, whose name is on there? You can say, well, it's my name. But you have a partner, and it's called Uncle Sam, okay? And Uncle Sam one day is going to say, hey, I'm ready for you to pay up. You have to ask yourself, let's say you are 15, 20 years out from retirement. You have to ask yourself, do you believe taxes will be higher than they are today? We're $36 trillion in debt. The clock's still ticking upwards. We can't guarantee and tell you where taxes are going to be, but the CBO, Congressional Budget Office, says they're going to have to go up in order to pay for the programs that we have.
And speaking of the CBO, I mean, James, you know this. We've been teaching retirement classes for a decade now.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we stressed, which is crazy to me, is I think it was 2015, 2016, somewhere around that time, the interest on the national debt that we were paying was around $400 billion. And we used to say, if interest rates return to just normal levels, we'll be approaching almost $1 trillion just in interest on the national debt. So when we look at that debt, if we don't get things changed, because we look at Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, interest on the national debt comprises about 90% of our spending. So we got 10% left to spend for all these other government programs that we have. So the thing I always try to impress upon people, and I don't want to be a fearmonger, but when we talk about planning, and we don't want to just think about what's going to happen in the stock market, how much of our money are we going to get to keep? And if we don't properly plan for taxes, we may not get to keep as much as we want.
All right, we have a lot to cover, especially when it comes to Medicare. And we'll get to that here in a little bit. Rick, what's the best way, and I know the number's been on your screen and, of course, the website, the best way to communicate with you and connect with
Call us at 423-641-0999 or visit our website, hughesretirementgroup.com.
All right, let's talk about Medicare. How does that factor in?
Well, that's a big part of retirement planning.
Sure.
And I think most firms out there don't do this for their clients. They farm it out to people, and that's fine. Granger and I believe it's very important to try to help our clients through the entire process. Medicare, first of all, can be very confusing, James. It changes each and every year. We have to go through certifications and exams and so forth to make sure we're updated each and every year. But here's what I would want our viewers to understand about Medicare is if you're getting ready to turn 65, you basically have a 7-month window, 3 months prior, the month of your birthday, 3 months after to make some type of decision. There's no health questions or anything like that. Some people will ask, when do I get my Medicare card, that red, white, and blue card? Mm-hmm. There's a couple ways. If you're drawing Social Security, it should, if your mailman delivers it, it should automatically show up in your mailbox, okay? If you are not drawing Social Security, you're going to have to apply. You can go to ssa.gov and apply. You'll have to set up a Social Security account as well. You can get an appointment at the Social Security office, whatever you need to do, but it doesn't just automatically happen if you're not drawing Social Security, okay?
And one thing I would add to that, I mean, the most people, the standard premium for Part B, I mean, people think Medicare, they think it's, it costs money. Well, really, technically, Part B is the only part you're paying for, and the standard premium for that right now is $185. So we always talk to our clients about, especially in that retirement phase, if you've maybe worked a little bit longer, or the government's looking back 2 years at what you made, so there's a potential that you could actually pay more for that than the standard premium of $185.
We have clients paying almost $700 a month for that. There's different thresholds, as Granger's just saying there. We've got people also on the Medicare side that pay nothing, okay, because they're qualifying for state Medicaid. But the standard premium, most people are going to pay that $185. Then once you get the Medicare, James, you have some options. You can choose a Medicare supplement or a Medigap plan. It's basically filling in the gaps where the Medicare does not. You could look at a Medicare Advantage plan. You see all these commercials all the time. That's what they're talking about. I would warn people, I always say this, not all Medicare Advantage plans are created equal. One of the biggest things you want to look at is networks. Are my doctors and my medications covered? That's one of the biggest things you're looking at when you're choosing a Medicare Advantage. We do all this for our clients. Again, whether they're financial or not, there is no cost in us helping them.
Okay. And one thing I would say, our staff, I mean, especially during open enrollment, fields so many calls. So those commercials, we'll get people who have been clients of ours for 10, 15 years. They'll call in and say, hey, are there new things in Medicare? Because the commercials can sound a little, lucrative, if you will.
Right.
I'm trying to watch what I say here. But generally speaking, so when we're working with companies, we're going to represent most of the major carriers, and we're going to try to look and say, okay, James, what is the best plan for you?
And it just makes sense that you would sit down with somebody talking about retirement and allowing you guys to get that Medicare plan that's right for that individual. It just makes sense that you would all kind of sum it up in basically one visit.
I mean, mostly when you're retiring. Of course, we've seen, I think, a transition of people working longer.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, I started this. I got my insurance license when I was 18, so I've been doing this a long time. 19 now.
He's been doing it for a year. No, I've known him forever.
So
you've been doing it for a long time.
So basically, people that are dealing with Medicare, if they're working beyond 65, some of them may delay their Part B.
Yeah.
But years ago, I mean, we saw a lot of people retiring at 65 like clockwork. But if you're working and all of a sudden you've got this 401k and you're looking to go ahead and start your retirement planning process, a lot of times Medicare is going to accompany that decision.
Okay. All right, let's talk about CDs. Talk to us about CDs.
CDs, obviously the interest rates right now are still high. Mm-hmm. You can go out and get you a CD, whether it be 6 month, maybe 12 month. You want to shop at different banks and so forth to do that, but around 4%. So that's pretty good, because if we think before COVID, it was paying about 0.25%. Mm-hmm. So you're actually losing money in that area. But when you start looking, there's alternatives to CDs. And, when we start talking about alternatives where you could potentially make 10 to up to 13%, depending on what type of note that we would look at. I know we have classes on this. So if you're thinking about 4%, it's not bad now, okay? I mean, a lot of people say I'd take that, but I would say, would you be interested in maybe 8 to 10% or 10 to 13, depending on the strategy and so forth we could go with, because it's very good.
All right, so to connect with you guys, give us the website, give us the phone number, and you definitely want to sit down with these gentlemen and their team at the Hughes Retirement Group.
So yeah, the telephone number is 423-641-0999, or visit us at HughesRetirementGroup.com.
So we'd all like to believe that we've made the right calls as we head into retirement. But Rick, in your mind, how do you retire with confidence?
We've talked about this many times, James. The biggest thing is you need to know for sure how much net income you need in retirement. So when you hear people say you need $1 million, $2 million to retire, I'm going to say that is not correct, okay? How much are you going to spend? We have clients that retire with less than $1 million. We have clients that have several million, okay? It depends on how much you're going to spend. So that obviously is going to give you confidence if you know, okay, here's our budget, here's how much we know that we need to bring in each month, and here's how much we know that we're going to spend. If that's the case, it's taking away the fear of you outliving your money, because when we think of retirement, we need to be thinking 25, 30 years. And as I've heard Granger say many times, it's expensive to live. When you retire and that you stop getting that check, it's very important that you've got a plan put together.
And great advice too, what you said just a few moments ago. 2-3 years before you know you're going to retire, create that budget as if you were going to retire.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the thing is, to his point, I mean, if you're out there, I think in today's world, we talked about Medicare earlier, like all the commercials, and there's so many different commercials from different financial firms, and I think people are inundated with so much information, and they don't really know the difference of company X versus company Y. But I think when you're looking, you're saying, okay, you're not looking for a stockbroker per se when you're going to retire. You're not looking for somebody who's going to pick stocks, winners and losers. But what you're looking for is somebody that can, as you mentioned earlier, Dad, fill that income need. So what's our Social Security look like? What's the probability we're going to get all that Social Security via taxes or potentially penalties? What's our health care look like? We've talked about Medicare. What about long-term care? What's our income going to look like in addition to Social Security? Do we have assets to create income from? What's our risk profile? Are we invested in accordance to our risk profile, or are they disconnected? And then we talked about taxes as a whole. So all of those things come together, and then you kind of go beyond that, and you can look at estate planning and things of that nature. But once you start putting all those pieces together, and it's not as difficult as it may sound. It sounds like a lot of information, but once you start putting those pieces together, it can kind of free you up mentally to go ahead and live your retirement and not worry about what's happening in the markets every single day.
Okay, with you saying that, Granger, many people like to do their own investing. What does that look like? What kind of advice would you give to as someone who?
Well, I would say this. Is that what you're retiring to? You want to do your own investing, or do you want to actually enjoy retirement? We have people that would prefer to do that, and that's fine. But it's a job. It's something that you need to look at least a few times a week and maybe daily. That's what we do. That is our career and what we do. So I'm never going to tell somebody it's wrong for them to do their own investing. If you enjoy it, we will have some clients that will say, I'd like to have a little bit of money that I'm just playing with by myself. But the question is, do you want to work with your entire portfolio and deal with your retirement for 25 or 30 years?
And also, too, we're living longer.
We are, yeah. And, well, one thing I would say on that, I mean, when we talk about living a long time, I think, especially with today's technology, it's so easy to buy and sell a stock. You're not waiting for a stock certificate in the mail anymore, right? I mean, so you may own something for a day, half a day, an hour. Yeah. And I think it can almost turn in, and it's not, but it can almost turn into gambling, because you're trying to pick that next winner. Hey, my friend made this much, and you want to try to keep up with that, and it can be a very difficult battle. And this is where I think we've seen issues with clients that have come to us from classes who maybe have had significant losses, because now all of a sudden you're playing a game where you could let your emotions get involved, and you're sitting there and you're saying, okay, 2017 was great. You feel like, oh my gosh, I'm a phenomenal trader, and then 2018 fourth quarter, you're thinking, wow. Do the markets ever go green? Is it going to be red every single day? So I think there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of play money and doing some fun things with it if you want. But when we're talking about developing a retirement plan, we're not talking about just asset allocation. There's so many other things that are involved, like I mentioned prior.
I want to read this. According to a recent survey, 2/3 of workers said that they would need $500,000 to retire comfortably. What do you say about that?
Well, it's kind of what I said earlier.
You're right.
It comes down, let's just say it's $500,000, James, but they want to spend $100,000 a year. Let's do the math. Think that's going to work out?
I talk for a living. I can do the math on that one.
It is if they only live 5 years, maybe, right?
Okay, sure.
So if they're living 20 to 30 years, then that's not the case. But I don't want people to get panicked out there and think I'm going to need $2 million or $5 million to retire. That's why I think that budget is very, very important. Don't wait till you retire to develop that. Develop that now. Hopefully you're going into retirement without a mortgage payment or without car payments. That's two big ticket items that you want to try to take care of if at all possible.
Yeah. Where do they come up with these numbers?
I mean, look, every time you turn on the news, you see somebody on CNBC or Fox Business, whoever, saying things. So, I mean, just like you could turn on Fox News and one guy could say, hey, I think the markets are going to, drop to, the Dow's going to drop to 10,000 points. And then you could say, the other guy's saying, hey, I'm seeing bullish signals. But, the thing I worry about people when they are doing things like that or looking at that magic number, they're not truly factoring in what the markets could do. And this is why I say that. And I've said this so many times. You got all these retirement calculators out there, right? You can go onto your retirement plan, you can plug in, and it can look great when you plug the numbers in. But often when you plug those numbers in, they're linear assumptions. So my question to you, James, would be, if you plugged in 5% average return, and you had a 30-year retirement, what are the chances you get 5% on the dot every single year for 30 years?
That's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. You may average it. Right. So when you're plugging this into a retirement calculator, you're basing it off linear assumptions. You're not even really basing it off what you actually own. Yeah. The 5% is irrelevant compared to what you own. So one of the things we do is we sit down with the client, we actually test their portfolio and show them statistically, on average, here's what you've actually gotten. And not only that, this particular holding over the past 30 years, here's what it's average. So when you start putting all of that together in a risk profile, you can really start to say, okay, the likelihood of if you 30, 35-year retirement with these holdings, here's the likelihood that you don't run out of money.
All right, Rick, give us the number, give us the website to connect with you guys.
641-0999 or HughesRetirementGroup.com.
As we heard earlier, tax planning is crucial. So are there strategies that can move retirements into a lower tax bracket?
There are, and you always bring up taxes with me.
I know.
It's tax planning. I'm not a tax preparer, so don't call me to your
We always have to talk about taxes, of course, with Granger.
But I would say, yes, there are, and especially when we look kind of where we're at from a tax environment, we're about 3% discount from 2017. So if we're looking at conducting Roth conversions, one of the things that we do is we actually do a tax map process. So you plug everybody's income in and see what they're looking at. And it's basically a legitimate map, and it shows you, the 10 to the 12, 22, 24, so forth. And basically, we look for windows of opportunity. So if we've got $30,000 left, let's just say, for example, before we hit that next bracket, well, then we can go ahead and say, hey, I feel comfortable paying at a 22% clip, and I believe that when I retire, it's going to be higher than 22%, so I want to kind of load up this 22% bucket and go ahead and pay those taxes now. So we look for opportunities and windows, and how much do we do at a time, because once we get that money to tax-free, it obviously helps us in the long run.
And for some, Rick, I was going to ask you, for some, taxes in retirement could cost more than food, clothing, healthcare combined. So how can we lessen our tax?
Well, I mean, again, it's the unknown, right? We don't know where taxes are going to be. So if we look right now at the administration that we have, the tax code we're presently under, which was President Trump, it's set to expire December 31st of this year, okay? Unless Congress does something. Now, they're beginning to work on that and would like to extend it permanently. I don't know if that'll happen, but at least extend it for the next 4 years that he is president. So, again, as you just mentioned, there's some expensive items out there. Granger mentioned Roth conversions. Obviously, would you rather get your money out tax-free down the road or wait and pay the taxes then? That's the unknown, okay? My belief is if the national debt is $36 trillion and continues to climb every second of the day, and we're paying about $1 trillion in interest on the national debt, the math tells me that they may have to raise taxes in the future. But again, I'm going to go back to what Granger was saying on Roth conversions a moment. You may have a viewer out there saying, I've got $1 million and I think I want to convert that thing right now to a Roth. You have to think about it. You got to pay the taxes now, so it would put you in the highest tax bracket. So he was talking about tax mapping. There's a strategy involved, and we can do it systematically over time. So if we think taxes are going to be where they are right now for the next 5 years, now would be the time to systematically set that up for 5 years.
And I know we got to move on quick, but one thing I would say, and we don't have a ton of time here, but mathematically, there's an ideal amount to have in each bucket. Now, that's going to be obviously based off of how much other income you have.
Right.
But we're not against contributing to traditional 401ks.
Right.
It's actually a way where you could potentially reduce your income today, grow it tax deferred. What if you could withdraw it tax free? So mathematically, there are ways to do that.
So you're saying you can withdraw it legally?
Correct. Yeah, there's a difference in tax avoidance and tax evasion, as we know.
That's good. I'm glad you guys know the difference there. Yeah. We got about a minute, 15 seconds. For those that really want to connect with you guys, what's that like? Maybe the last couple of years, they've been going, it's a little intimidating to sit down with a financial planner. But everything you guys
Do you think we're intimidated?
No, not at all.
We're pretty casual guys.
Right, of course. But the thing is, but no one's ever really worked with a financial advisor. Yeah. Those who are saying that right now, what do the steps look like?
It can be intimidating, and one of the first things we do is we sit down, we have a casual meeting, see kind of what your goals and objectives are, see what assets you have and how you want to kind of assemble those. We're pretty no pressure guys, and other thing I would say, and one of my clients actually just said this to me the other day. She said one of the things that I liked about dealing with you guys was the fact that you don't just take on any client. So we got to make sure that it works for both parties. As he's always said, it's kind of like a marriage. So you want to make sure that it's working for both parties.
And I think, James, a big thing is we're not going to talk over your head. Yeah. I think a lot of people, they sit down with advisors and then they walk and get in their car and they'll say, honey, what did they just say?
What just happened?
We're going to bring it down to that you can understand. If you can't understand, then we haven't done our job. So we're going to make it, again, educational, but something you can understand.
Give us the website. Give us the phone number one more time.
423-641-0999 or HughesRetirementGroup.com. You may even have a QR code there that you can scan.
All righty. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us. And thank you for joining us.